No. I always forget to pay for parking. I use the app, but I just literally don't put in my phone and I'll forget anyway. Julie's not able to come.
Julie, you can hear us, right?
Yes, I can. Thank
All right,
you.
sweet.
I got a ticket 2 days ago. I
Yeah.
really, I don't.
2 days ago, yesterday, because a bunch of us got it one
I
yesterday.
got 2 days ago. I'm pretty sure it's 2 days ago.
I got one yesterday.
Cool. Gotta pay that.
Actually, I guess I should probably be on the whiteboard.
Oops, I'm so sorry. I didn't know I moved the whole table.
The top part's actually not even connected to the legs on it.
It's not?
It's like a huge board, like it's not gonna fall off or anything, but
Oh, I see.
that's why it moves so easily.
Oh. Hi. Here you go.
Sorry.
Where are you going?
No.
What? No, Julie's not able to come.
Oh.
She's on the Zoom with us right up there on the camera. Hey, Julie.
Hi.
That's all of us.
Butch, are you able to like record it and then I'll watch it on my own time on Friday? Cause I
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think what we're gonna do for all of them, we're gonna record all of them from now on. That way, just like in the future, like long in the future, we can always look at them.
Hi, Julie.
Hi.
That is how I feel right now.
It's like the rainy day.
It's sorry, yeah. Did you stay here all day?
It does. He actually.
Nope, but I gotta go to my office and grab it, so. Sorry. Hi, everybody. So exciting, look at all of this, I'll be right back.
This just reminds me of a giant sunboard this table. I love it. But I just wanna like stand on it and go paddleboarding. But it's very beautiful.
Does anyone follow Lisa Rinna on Instagram?
No.
No, I didn't.
Oh, what? She kills me. Lisa Rinna.
I don't know.
She posts like these dancing videos, like TikTok.
You have to come in here because this is their time and ask if you can intrude on their time.
I guess, can I answer it on your time?
Yeah.
Who do you think you are?
Cool.
What are you, a broker or something?
Yes, actually, I'm going for a driver's license.
Did you ask Julie? She's up on-
Wow,
This is a virtual training.
this is
Ooh,
crazy.
nice. No, so the property's gonna expire in about a month or so. Right?
Yep.
Just wanted to run it by you. The other agent may not take kindly to me sending over a pre-listing packet and stuff like that. Is that something I should take into consideration, wait until it's expired, or am I okay to get the green light and go ahead?
What is your obligations under the code of ethics and the state law or the code of ethics?
Well, I have no client.
What's that?
I have no client. I'm not representing anybody right now.
But what does the code of ethics, which you as a realtor agree to abide by, say about you talking to somebody else's client?
Fair and honest, right?
No, that's the law about talking to a consumer that you hasn't engaged you yet.
Okay, so I don't know.
Anybody else know?
Repeat the question. I was listening.
So he's been prospecting. Okay. First of all, you solicited her
Correct. When it was expired,
when it was expired.
which was like when I first got here, so.
Julie, can you hear this? I just want to make sure you're.
Yeah, a little bit. It's hard to hear him a little bit.
Come on in. Explain yourself since you're taking my time.
You're on the cameras right there.
Camera's right there. Speak into the microphone.
Hi,
please.
Julie.
Hi.
Okay, so when I first started, I was calling expired listings, and I talked to a lady who's actually an ex-broker herself. She's older, she's 82 years old, and she doesn't really want to like do anything anymore. She has a condo in Manchester by the sea, 2-bed, 1-bath, and I couldn't secure the listing, but it's now active with another agent. I just retouched base with her today, about a half hour ago. And she's not happy with the job that the agent's doing, and it's been on the market for about 58 days now. It will be expired in about a month or so, she told me. So I guess my question is, under what ethics do I have to, and what guidelines do I have to follow soliciting her when she's already obviously under contract with another agent?
So the good news is that you're prospecting. You called her when she was expired. The bad news is that when you called her back, you didn't bother to check whether it was relisted or not. So now you've technically solicited somebody else's client, which is not kosher,
Okay.
and could be an ethical violation if somebody chose to follow up on it. So to answer your other question was, what is your follow-up now?
Mhm.
What do you think it should be knowing that?
Wait until it expires.
Bingo.
Okay.
Okay. If she calls you back and says, where is it? All right, then at that point you can say she called you and you can follow through on that. You have every right to talk to somebody else's client about a future opportunity. You don't have the right to go solicit somebody else's client to try to get them fired or removed or anything else.
And so a lesson also learned is that if I'm prospecting somebody even that I talked to like months and months and months ago, check the property to see if it's active.
Always,
Right, okay,
always.
good to know.
Okay?
Sorry
So-
to take up your time.
So you can go back to that person, the seller though, because they probably have the last words, right? So you could reply back and say that like sorry, I'm actually not able to talk about it right now, but in the future, like I'd be happy to help you.
I'd
Are
let
you
it
able to go
die
back
on the
and say
vine
that,
at
or-
this time and see
Okay.
what happens of it, right? Because even though she's a broker, it should know better, right? Number one. Number two, the two people that can file the complaint are either the seller, the person he's speaking to, or the agent. So if the agent gets wind of it, he might file an ethics violation.
Gotcha.
And who could he file the ethics violation with? Is that us? What's that?
That's us.
No, it's against you. It's not against me.
Yeah.
But what entities would they file that through?
NAR.
The Northeast is so it's the local association of realtors, right? And where else could they do it? An ethics violation.
MLS.
What's that?
MLS.
Anything that occurs as a result of MLS is going to be handled through the Northeast Association of Realtors. Who issues your license, your real estate license at the state level?
The actual state itself,
Mm-hmm.
that's just the board.
The board. What's
Realtors.
nope.
It would be
What?
Division of Professional Licensure.
Oh.
So in theory, they can file an ethics violation there
right.
against you as well.
So obviously at this point, I can't really do anything or say anything until it is expired.
You can do whatever you want. It's whether or not it's ethical or not.
Correct.
So all I'm going to tell you is if it were me, I certainly wouldn't be doing anything else. And as soon as the minute that thing's expired, I'd be all over it.
Right. Okay.
Just a thought.
Thank you.
Sure.
That was your lesson for the day, class.
You can go home now.
Good job.
Oh, Julie, you're
Thank
already
you.
home. You're already there.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
All right, so just to kind of recap from yesterday, who wants, let's just talk about some of the concepts from yesterday. This is weird, sorry. Agency, what is agency? Blurt it out.
Organizing transactions.
Organizing transactions, very good. And when you have what's the difference between a customer and a client? Customer and a client.
You could do
Client.
to a client.
You have fiduciary obligation to a client, but if you were explaining the difference of a customer and a client to a consumer, well, how would you put it in layman's terms? Because most people have no idea what a fiduciary is.
No contract or contract.
What was that,
A
Mariah?
customer.
Sorry, that's okay. Just trying to get everybody else to jump in.
Clients have contracts, customers do not.
Correct, okay? And so that's why we say what? We are working with a customer, but we're working for a client. And when you're working for somebody, that means what? You have a,
Fiduciary.
okay,
Contract.
what's another word for working for somebody? We didn't talk about this yesterday, but let's see if you can come up with it real quick. Another word for working for somebody, which means implies you have a contract and it implies that you have a fiduciary.
Employed or hired?
What's that?
Employed or hired?
You could, that would be one way.
Is
Another
it
word I'm
one,
looking
one
for.
word or two words?
One word. We use it all the time. I just don't think anybody's connected the dots yet. So think of it in terms of an attorney working with a client. They do what? With their client.
Represent.
There you go. Okay, so represent is another word for, implies that there's a fiduciary. So you use, I work for people, I represent people. Those two descriptions imply that you have a fiduciary responsibility and therefore you have a client. Okay? So who remembers the acronym? What is the acronym? And then we'll go through what it means for the definition or the elements of fiduciary. First of all, what is a fiduciary? Do you remember, John?
I know it's a legal obligation.
It is definitely a legal obligation.
I know the acronym's old car,
Okay.
and I probably remember most.
So if I'm a consumer, how are you going to explain what a fiduciary is to me without getting into the weeds of old car? Luch, do you remember?
Legally, it's what the law says you have to provide to the consumer.
Okay.
Ethical.
Legal and ethical
Transparency.
trust.
All lawful
Trust.
purposes. Or it was the opposite of that though.
What's the opposite of what?
Anything that's not unlawful.
That's one of the elements, but give me the overriding description. Give me the one sentence description of fiduciary that a consumer is going to go, okay, I get it. Julie? I look up there. You're over there. Sorry.
A legal and ethical obligation.
I'm sorry. Say that again.
Legal and ethical obligation
Involving what? Yes, but involving what?
involving a disclosure form.
Nope. Nope. It's the T word.
Trust.
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 Right? Ethical and legal obligation when you're in a position of trust, typically within a financial transaction. Think about who has a fiduciary, an attorney, a CPA, that type of profession. Okay, Luch, I have an idea because it's going to throw me off if I don't. I'm going to put the camera down here so I can look
Yeah.
at the camera and
Yeah.
just it's weird for me. Sorry. First time doing this, Julie. Sorry.
Oh no, that's all right. Thank you guys for doing it.
Let me see if there's a way to raise the volume real quick too.
So while he's pointing to that and you're getting seasick, let's do this. So what are the 6 elements of fiduciary? What's the first one?
Obedience.
Obedience. And what does it mean?
Obedience is, so we explained it, like not letting your client, like. you have to
One
be-
sentence or
I know,
less.
I'm trying to.
One sentence or less.
I'm looking. But follow lawful instructions.
Follow all lawful instructions. Great. Julie, what was L?
Loyalty. Loyalty.
Okay, and how would you describe it to a consumer?
Acting in someone's trust?
Acting who wants to help her out. Acting in
Best interest.
their best
Best
interest.
interest.
And what kind of attention are you giving them?
Your undivided attention. They're your one and only.
Correct. Very good. All right, Madison, what is D?
Disclosure,
And what does it mean?
the passing of information from one person to another.
Awesome. And what is it that you're disclosing?
Issues with the house,
And not?
the person.
Jonathan, what is confidentiality?
Not.
Okay. And can you keep things confidential about the house or the property?
It's confidentiality only for the person over the house.
Okay. Okay. And A, Mariah, is for what?
Counting,
Okay, and what does that relate to?
tracking of funds, debits and credits,
Mhm.
computer track.
Great. And lastly is reasonable care. Luke, what is reasonable care?
Telling people what they need to hear and not what they want to hear.
So it has to be that easy for each of those 6 elements. It has to be that easy to be able to say, do you know what a fiduciary is? No? Okay, it's a legal, ethical, related to trust, and it involves these elements if you need to go into it. Okay? Who has, or who should I say, who doesn't have their Massachusetts mandatory real estate licensee consumer relationship disclosure form with them?
Yeah, it's on my desk.
Why don't you go get it,
Yeah.
please? Julie, do you have yours?
I have it right here.
Awesome, okay. So while we're waiting for Jonathan to come back, does anybody have any immediate questions on it?
I had a quick question,
Okay.
which you probably might go over, but the designated sellers and buyer's agent, how it differs from the seller's agent and the buyer's agent? Does that mean like if, say, someone hired you as their agent, but you work for, the agency, and then say I came on to help you and I did the open house, is that like a seller's agent? And then if it was designated, I couldn't come and help you without written consent?
Designated versus non-designated, and we'll get into it in a few minutes, is
Okay.
is managed at the firm level.
Okay.
Okay, whereas the agency itself is as much on the firm level as as the individual level. It's a little confusing, but we'll get there. So,
Okay.
So we will come to that.
Okay.
Good question. Jonathan, did you have any immediate questions before we jump in? Okay, so what is this document that's now in front of you? It's a disclosure, which, as Madison said, is what, Mariah? What is the definition of a disclosure?
It's not a contract, it's just acknowledgement.
It's acknowledgement, but what is the purpose of a disclosure?
Passing information from one person to another.
Right, so, and again, I'm gonna keep driving these things through everybody just so that you get more comfortable with it. I'm not trying to embarrass anybody, okay? So we have this thing called the Massachusetts Mandatory Real Estate Licensee Consumer Relationship Disclosure Form. So 2 things. Number 1, how do you know it's a state-generated form?
Has the seal up top?
Because of the seal up top, and what else?
It's really long.
The title of the form typically is longer than the form itself, because it's a state-generated. Just kidding. You know it because it says Commonwealth of Massachusetts on top. Okay. Now it's actually produced by the Massachusetts Association of Realtors, so the state level of the Realtor Association, at the request of and at the approval of the state. But it is a state mandated requirement that you do what, Luciano?
Give it to every person at the first face to face. We have them sign it, first face to face.
Okay, so do we all agree with that?
Not a
Yeah,
specific
something.
property.
Okay, I agree with that. What else? I agree with all of it, but what's the one element that is missing from this description? Part of it,
You have to let them know it's not a contract.
that would be wise.
It should
Are you
say.
just gonna give it to them to read it?
Oh, you're gonna explain it to them.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay? It's your requirement under the law, not just to give it to them, but to review it with them. And I would tell you it's a matter of company policy, even if it weren't a matter of law, that you should do that with not only every disclosure that you're signing and they're signing, so that would be this disclosure, say the lead paint disclosure because you both sign it, but any contract your buyer is going to sign that you're involved with outside of the purchase and sale. So that means in our world, an offer to purchase, which is also a contract. Okay? You cannot practice law, meaning you can't explain to them the legal ramifications of the contract as if you were an attorney. You cannot give them legal advice. But you can certainly tell them what it's about, and if they have questions, what should they do? If it's a contract, go see an attorney. Okay? So it's a state form because it's a state requirement. It's a state form and requirement about what? If you were to describe this form in one sentence or less, which is the same question I'm going to ask you 100 times every time we look at a new form, how would you describe this form to a consumer, especially when it's got like a 9 or 10 word title? Nine. How would you describe it?
To show your relationship that you're gonna have with them.
Your legal obligation.
Yeah, that you're.
All
So
the different ways that you can represent them.
is it possible that I give them that form and I don't represent them?
Yeah,
Mhm.
Okay, so because represent means what?
you're working for them.
Okay. But is it possible that I'm working with a consumer but not representing them?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you want to change that definition? Does anybody want to help them?
It could just be a form to ensure that we have the same understanding of each type of agency that we may engage in.
Okay, I like that. But you use the word agency, and how many consumers are going to know what agency means? Because agency means what, Julie?
Legal, a trust, obligation, a legal obligation and trust. I have to look at it.
Consciously, no,
Representation.
Legal and ethical trust.
no, that's
Organization.
Oh, that's
organization of transactions. Organization of transactions, right?
Yeah, but I guess even wouldn't be a good word to use either because this also talks about facilitator.
Sure does.
So,
Which is also known as what? A non-agent, which is really kind of an oxymoronic statement, but we won't go there. I didn't design the form.
right.
So there's other ways you can assist or represent them.
Do you like that definition, Mariah?
I would
Clearly
say-
I don't, so that's why I'm asking somebody else.
I would say it's the way that you can represent them, but also your obligation to them if you were to represent them. And yeah, so
Madison, help her out. I'll be sorry.
Mm,
You've
I'm
never
also
done this
a little
before.
stuck on it too. I feel like this represents like all of the things that I am going to do for you, and it also says all of the things that you need to see a professional for. If like
So you're not a professional?
like they say lead paint and stuff like that in there. I don't know.
Okay. Help her out, Jessica.
It's talking about like, if you're talking about a specific property, it's what you know about the property to your best of
Well,
knowledge.
that's the law, right? The law
Yeah.
just says I have to tell you everything I
Yeah.
know about a property, whether you're a consumer, a customer, or a client, right?
so you're facilitated,
What's that?
how you represent them and facilitate for them.
Well, doesn't it talk about both representation? It talks about buyer's agent, which would imply what there's a fiduciary, which means I represent them. But it also talks about facilitator, which is a non-agent, and is there any representation as a facilitator?
It's all the possible relationships a licensed real estate agent can have with a consumer.
That is the best description you could possibly have. So good for you.
I was faking it the first time.
All right, wanna say it again?
Can you repeat it?
It's all the possible relationships a licensed real estate agent can have with a consumer.
So how do I wind that into a conversation? Hey, I gotta go over this form with you. It's got a really long name. It's a state requirement. Basically what the form says is it talks about all the different types of relationships that I, as a licensee, can have with you as a consumer. Make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. Now, why does the state require this? Let's talk about that for a moment.
So,
Julie, any thoughts?
So that you're just transparent, so everything's free and clear, so there's not everyone suing everyone saying, I didn't get this, I didn't know what this is. I feel like it's more of an informational disclosure than anything else.
That's exactly right. Because back in the day when I got into the business 100 years ago, buyer agency was, even though it had been in the state for about 10 years, was still in its infancy. At the time, we were one of the only firms that actually used an exclusive right to buy agreement and actually represented buyers. But back before 2005, I, as a real estate agent, by default, according to the law, when I went and met with a consumer and worked with a consumer and took them through a house, I automatically defaulted to representing the seller. Okay, so let me twist your brains a little bit on what does that mean. That means that when I took Jonathan, somebody I just met on the street getting a cup of coffee, he saw my business card and said, I'm really interested in the property. Can you go show me the property that's listed by Caldwell Banker down the street at 123 Main Street? They say, sure, come on down. That meant that I, Eric, working for Lillian Montalto Signature Properties, could take Jonathan, the consumer, who I barely have a relationship with, so he's a customer or client, customer, okay?
Customer.
I can take this customer and go to Caldwell Banker's listing at 123 Main Street, and who do I represent? The seller. How do you think that worked?
Not good.
Now, what was that?
Not, yeah.
Why do you think that?
Well, everything just got so confusing because it's like who has, like Caldwell has the listing, but then any agent that has their license can just go show the house, and then who
Well, isn't that the case today though? Can any agent in theory just show the house?
don't you have to
Obviously,
don't you have to contact the listing agent to make sure it's
you
okay?
won't.
And
I
like,
would have to contact that listing agent too. Back in the day. Right,
there
so
more-
if I default, by default, through no effort of my own, through no discussion, through no engagement of Jonathan other than let's go see the property, I represent the seller because I default to seller representation. What does that mean to Jonathan? Am I working for Jonathan? Am I working with Jonathan? Am I working for the seller, or am I working with the seller?
it's for the seller.
Okay, which means I owe them what? Okay,
You owe them an old car.
I owe them an old car. They can have my old car, trust me. And so if I owe them old car, what do I owe Jonathan?
just
Nothing.
honesty.
Honesty and
Fair deal.
fair dealing. So what does that mean? What is honesty and fair dealings?
You're gonna be truthful about what you can disclose, what you know.
Right. I have to disclose everything about the property. I gotta do that anyway, because that's the law. I gotta treat them fairly. So I can't say, hey, Jonathan, there's multiple offers on the property when there's not multiple offers.
Right.
Okay? So I have to be fair and honest with them. But who am I working for? So what does that mean that I'm working for? Jonathan wants to write an offer on that property that I show him. And again, remember, we're in the context of not what you are going to operate in, but it's a great example, right? So meaning that since 2005, you don't default to a seller agency. There is no default. I'll get into that in a second. But pre-2005, I defaulted no matter when I met somebody, how I met them, and unless they actually signed something that said I'm their buyer's agent, I defaulted to working for the seller, even though what? It could be somebody else's listing from a different company. I've never met the seller in my entire life.
John's basically he's working for himself and can write.
John's not working because he's the consumer. So what do I owe John? I owe fair dealings and honesty. What do I owe the seller?
This whole list.
This whole list, right? And so what does that mean? Who am I negotiating on? Whose behalf am I
The
negotiating?
seller.
John's or the seller? Seller, right? Who's gonna get my market knowledge and my negotiating skill in total? Jonathan or the seller?
Seller.
All right, so that's the world that we lived in for 100 years until 2005 in the state of Massachusetts. Talk about a wacky world.
And then how would the commission work with you and the
Let's
listening?
not talk about commission right now. Okay, we'll get into that. I'll answer that question, but not today. So if you want to write it, remind me. If you don't think I
Eric,
answered.
I have a quick question. So then were the buyers, so Jonathan, who your customer is, would they get confused because they would think that you were working for them when in fact you were really working for the seller? So I could see how that was just a mess.
Well, it never happened to me. Do you know why?
Because you disclosed, you didn't do that?
I didn't. No, I had to do that because I always defaulted to the seller.
Uh-huh.
But what did the state law require me to do at the first personal meeting to discuss a specific property? So I meet him on the street pre-2005 where I default to representing the seller. It's a great question. I had to do what? The same thing you have to do.
Disclose the
First personal
information?
meeting to discuss a specific property. I had to put this form in front of them, except back then it just was automatically checked seller's agent. And I had to say, just so you know, I work for the seller. Okay? How many agents in the world do you think were comfortable saying that and more importantly, trying to explain it?
No one.
There were a lot of lawsuits. Okay? And so in 2005, there was that issue and another issue, which comes to Julie's original question about designated versus non-designated. That's when that all came into play and it changed the dynamic of this because now I don't default, or I should say, none of you default to a specific representation. You have to establish at that first personal meeting to discuss a specific property, the consumer has to know what your relationship with them is. Connor, if you're waiting for me, it's gonna be a while. 4 o'clock? All right, I will take a break in 30 minutes. And do me a favor, just apologize to everybody for interrupting them.
It's okay, Colin.
Individually, you have to name each of us and apologize.
So now that I lost my train of thought, so you have to, by now, you're having this discussion with a consumer so that they and you can make the choice of what that relationship's gonna be. Because you no longer default to a specific relationship. So there was one of the reasons that changed in 2005 was because of something called vicarious liability. Who wants to figure out what that means?
I know vicarious is you're living through someone else, so maybe you're acting as someone else without the person having knowledge. Vicarious.
Vicariously, right? No, that's a great way to describe it, right? You know, they talk about you vicariously living somebody else's life. What does that mean? You're kind of living as if you're them, okay? And so what does liability mean?
Through their actions, or,
Well, the liability is the fault of your actions, right?
Yeah.
So I carry risk with me that if I do something wrong, there's a liability. If I've done something wrong, then I'm going to be held liable for it. So what vicarious liability was is in that situation that I just described. So I meet Jonathan on the street. I go show pre-2005. I go show Jonathan 123 Main Street, which is listed by Caldwell Banker. And I say something that's not true about the property, or I misrepresent something about where the lot line is, and he buys the house and then he moves into the house and finds out that he's wrong. Guess who gets sued? I get sued, but who else is gonna get sued? The broker, it's called the banker, and who else? The seller. So the seller gets vicarious liability because of my action. So they are vicariously getting the liability that I brought to them. So I'll share a story with you that will hopefully scare the living bejesus out of you so that you never do anything as it relates to, one, certainly you can't because vicarious liability has been limited by the way we practice agency and the change in agency laws back in 2005. But it should scare you into thinking that there are a lot of things that if I don't say it right, I'm screwed in this business. Okay, and I have to be so blunt. So the story goes something like this. All the specifics, they're generalities now because I just don't remember it. But so there was a company here in Massachusetts in the Andover's. The agent, this is in 2000, this is pre-2005, so they defaulted to the seller, right? Okay, and so they took this buyer and they were out showing them properties along the border of New Hampshire. They were either missing out on offers because 2005 was a pretty hot market at that. 2004, 2005 was a pretty hot market. They kept missing properties and the prices of the properties were escalating. They basically got priced out of places like Andover and North Andover and so on and so forth. So the buyer said to the agent, hey, what if we go to, I'm okay going 5 miles up the road and we're in southern New Hampshire at that point, okay? So the agent said, okay, and started showing them properties in southern New Hampshire. They found a property that they liked. They made the offer. The offer got accepted. The buyer said to the agent when the inspection period came up, what inspection should I do? Should I do a septic inspection? And the agent said no. There's this thing called Title V. Now, just as a quick aside, does everybody know what Title V is? What is Title V? If you know, you can
Isn't
tell
your
me.
septic tank have to pass Title V? Like if you've been doing it annually?
Close. Who
Is
wants to
there
help
a report saying it's in good working order?
her? And what if it's not in good working order?
Then it won't pass.
So it's an inspection. So it's the state law. It's the reference to state law. Title V is part of the Mass General Laws that states that a property owner, prior to the transfer of the deed, is required by law to do an inspection of their on-site private septic system by a licensed, approved inspector who generates a 17 or 18-page report. And on that report, it says the system passes, it conditionally passes, or it fails. Passes, you're good to go. If it conditionally passes, that means it needs a repair. If it fails, it means to be replaced. Okay, we'll get into Title V. Say it with me on another day.
Another day.
Okay, so, but I need you to understand that. So the agent who had been showing them in Massachusetts now crossed the border and is showing them properties in New Hampshire, gets a property under agreement. The buyer asks the question about a septic system. The agent says, don't worry about it. The seller has to do Title V. You don't really need to do an inspection. They go to closing, and within a week after the closing, the agent gets a call from the buyer saying, I just want to let you know, we had a backup of the sewer system, and I'm told by the septic person that the septic system has failed. So the buyer turned around and sued who and why?
Probably you.
They sued everybody. So they sued the agent, the buyer agent. They sued the listing agent, right? Because the buyer had defaulted to sub-agency. It wasn't a buyer claimed, it was a buyer customer. So the buyer, the agent working with the buyer was basically working for the listing office. So they sued the listing agent. They sued the listing agent's broker. They sued the seller. And then the seller turned around and sued everybody else and sued everybody that sued them. Just a sec. Siri, Toby,
Siri's about to sue too.
are you about to sue me, Siri?
She wants to be included.
So why did the seller do it? Well, the moral of the story is that the agent wasn't licensed in New Hampshire. Okay, so the listing office, the listing agent, and the buyer agent literally paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages. Why? Because they enacted the consumer protection laws in both states, which meant that if they were found guilty of misrepresenting or doing something, bad business practices, then it's not just, if the damage was $100,000, it's 3 times that. So the moral to the story is this. Number 1, don't ever practice in a state that you're not licensed. Number 2, make sure that if you are working across borders, when you're duly licensed, you know what the differences in the state laws are, because they are different, even though it's 7 miles up the road.
New Hampshire doesn't require Title V.
There is no such thing as Title
That's
V in New Hampshire.
Why was the listing agent on the hook too? You said the listing agent also paid damages?
Because the buyer, the agent working with the buyer, was working as a sub-agent of the listing agent. So vicariously, the buyer working with the agent working with the buyer was effectively working for the listing office and the listing agent as a sub-agent. How confusing is all of this? A lot. Okay. So why is this all relevant? Well, let's talk about that, because I believe that you may have seen the word sub-agent in that document. Okay. And I want to be able to tell you what a sub-agent is. A sub-agent is just somebody that works for a different agent. Let me tell you, since 2005 and the agency law changes in the state of Massachusetts, as well as New Hampshire at a different time, the number of times that sub-agency has been practiced, to my knowledge, was that. Right? Because with the agency laws gave the ability that I didn't, as an agent, default for working for the seller, regardless of whose client the seller was. And because I now have to establish a relationship with every consumer that I work with, I've done what? I as an agency, I as the firm, I don't want Caldwell Bankers agents representing my clients, because they're going to do what? No offense to Caldwell Banker. They're going to bring us liability. So by automatically not offering sub-agency anymore and not defaulting to working for the seller, we've automatically eliminated 50% of the possible liability for our sellers and ourselves. Would you agree? And if you don't, it's okay. Or if you're don't understand it, it's okay, because it's a very convoluted, complicated process and subject matter. Does everybody understand why I said by not offering sub-agency, we've eliminated 50% of the vicarious liability, or liability in general?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Do we have to get a coffee break? Yes. All right, so back to the form. Okay, so we've established what? It's a state form because it's a state requirement. Somebody very astutely said, Mariah, I think it was you, that it's not a contract. How do you know it's not a contract? Says it right on there, right? So I generally, this is when I'm giving this presentation to a consumer. Hey, I've got some state things that the state requires me to do this with you. I'm going to put this form in front of you. It's a state form. It's a disclosure, which simply, if you're not familiar with the term, you're going to need to get used to it, because you're going to buy a piece of real estate. But a disclosure is just a passing of information from one party to the other. And in this particular case, it also means that it's not a contract. And by this way, look, it says it's not a contract. Okay, what is that little portion in the middle of the top 1/3 of the page there? So underneath where it says this is not a contract, there are 2 bands. What does it say in the middle? Somebody summarize those paragraphs that are in there, or those sentences that are in there.
Says when you need to present it to the person, to the consumer.
Okay, what else does it say?
Basically, it gives a definition of what it is
Okay,
in a paragraph.
okay. Who would like to read that paragraph aloud? Madison, I love it, go for it.
Alright, so the whole thing, alright. So it basically just says like what you can and can't do, right?
All right, so let's just take it from the top, read us the first sentence or paragraph, and then we'll stop and chat about it. And
Okay, this disclosure is provided to you, the consumer, by a real estate licensee listed in this disclosure. The time when the real estate licensee must provide this notice to the consumer. All real estate licensees must present this form to you at the first personal meeting with you to discuss a specific property.
Stop. Start that last sentence again. What's the operative word?
The first
No,
personal
Start
meeting
the
with you?
sentence again.
Okay. All real estate licensees must.
Stop. So all real estate licensees must. Okay? And why is that important? Because you're gonna bump into consumers out there that said, oh yeah, I bought before, or oh yeah, I've met with real estate agents and they were showing me property and so on and so forth. So when you whip out this form and go, you know what, the state requires me to do this, it's a disclosure, it's about the types of relationship we can have. Oh, that's right, you worked with an agent before, you obviously seen this form before. What do you think the answer is 95 times out of 100? I have no idea what you're talking about. And it's either from, you know, amnesia, less so, and more so because it never got introduced to the buyer at when? The first personal meeting to discuss a specific property. I will tell you that as a matter of training, it's very easy to do when you're going out on a listing appointment, right? Because you're going to their house. It's very easy to whip this out and say, this is our first personal meeting to discuss your property because I'm sitting here in your property. With a buyer, you're generally going to, you may have met them somewhere, but you're inviting them in for that consultation. We're going to say at the consultation, you break this out versus waiting till you meet to discuss that first specific property. Your consultation might be more general. It might not be about a particular property, but go ahead and go over it then and get it out of the way. Okay? If it's a Zillow, you got to kind of wing it in the middle of the appointment. You know, before, during, or after, but before you leave that appointment, that needs to have been reviewed.
So it can't be signed too early. If you met with someone to discuss properties in general, you could still get it signed.
So if you're up in front of the judge and you think the judge is going to say you're on trial because you signed this too early, or are you on trial because you never signed it? Right. The law's not going to say you did this too early. The law's going to say, all right, at least you did it, right? Somebody can argue that you did it too early, and I don't think they're going to have a snowball's chance in hell of getting anywhere close to getting that hung around your neck as something bad. Okay, I'm sorry, Madison, you're doing a fabulous job.
Okay. In the event this relationship changes, an additional disclosure must be provided and completed at that time. Consumer. Okay.
So what does that mean? It's a great, you know, as you read it, what does that mean? It means that the relationship can change? Is that what you take away from that last sentence? Mariah, is that what you take away from that last sentence?
Yes.
Okay. Julie, what about you? What do you take away from that last sentence?
I mean, it can change, but you need another disclosure. You can't do it without having another piece of paper signed or more information.
So, how can a relationship change?
They hire you for something else of these things?
Or maybe maybe it's like when, I forget the kid's name that came in, sorry. And he like told us that she wasn't happy with the seller. So
Yeah.
maybe that relationship could change because she did sign a form and she was with someone, but now she's not happy anymore. So that relationship with her former is going to change to become a new relationship.
Well, in theory, if I
Or it's ended.
did my job okay yesterday, there are really only two types of relationships you can have with a consumer, right? It's either a client or a customer, right?
Mhm.
So what would cause one of those to change and become the other? I'm sorry?
They went from clients. Are they, so once a person becomes a client, they can't go back to being a customer after the contract is ended, correct? Or like the sale's done.
Well, I don't disagree with that in theory, right? So if somebody hires you, I'm your client because I've hired you and our contract runs and it expires. The day after that, am I still your client? not technically, but we had the client relationship, so
Yeah.
I still owe you all of those things because my relationship with you and the point of all this is the relationship can change from property to property.
Yeah, so.
Can anybody give me an example of how a relationship can change from property to property? Which would require another one of these
What if-
forms to be signed.
What if you're representing them buying a house, but then they're like, we want to hire you to sell our house as well,
You wanna do what?
hire you to sell their house as well.
Well, they're gonna sign one, but it's a totally different
Different.
transaction, right?
Right.
Because it's a totally different relationship.
So there'd be two different, two of these forms, one with sellers and one with buyers.
So who's hosted an open house before? Okay, when you're standing in an open house, what's your relationship with the consumer that walks through the door? Customer, do you represent anybody when you're standing in that open house?
The seller.
So you represent the seller. I meet the consumer says, I wanna buy this house. Can you help me? And your answer is yes, no, or maybe.
Yes, you can help them, you can work with them, not for them.
Okay, does everybody follow what he just said?
Mhm.
Okay, so Madison walks into my open house. I'm standing there in the open house. If I'm the agent hosting the open house, I represent who?
The seller.
Okay, so I represent the seller. You and I have never met. You come to me after going through the house and go, Eric, I love the house. I gotta have it. Can you help me? My response is, sure. Why don't you meet me in my office at 3 o'clock and we sit down and we talk and you decide, Madison, that you're gonna write an offer. I am meeting with you to do what? Discuss the property. So it's the first personal meeting to discuss the property outside of the open house, which means I have to do what?
Give this form.
Okay, and so I give that form to you, and what do I say to you in terms of when we're going through the types of relationships? What's the relationship that I'm going to have with you?
If you take me on.
Is your head hurt yet?
Kind of, but if you take me
Does.
on as a client, wouldn't that make you a dual agent?
It would, and I can't do that because that would be illegal.
Okay,
Because didn't I already meet you at the property?
okay,
And who was I representing?
the seller.
Okay, so what box is gonna be checked on the front of that form when I hand it to you or
You're
review?
gonna check seller's agent.
Right, and my explanation is gonna be what? Hey, we met at the open house. I technically represent the seller. I can work with you, but I have to be fair and honest. But remember, don't tell me anything that's confidential. Don't talk to me about your timing, motivation, and value other than what we need to be able to write the offer, because if you share it with me, I have to do what?
Disclose,
Disclose it to whom?
the seller.
The seller, who I work for and who I'm negotiating for.
So in the meeting, sometimes when they talk about someone being unattached.
Yep.
Is that an example of them being unattached?
Unattached is a reference to the fact that they're not working with an agent outside of this office or in this office.
If you got that form that's in the listing package signed, having having the seller approve of dual agency, then you engage in dual agency. And
So to answer your question generically, of course you can engage in dual agency. Are you asking me if in this particular example that could be dual agency? The example that I met Madison at the open house, I represent the seller, or since my words, I represent the seller. She says, Eric, I want to buy the house. Can you help me? I say, yes. We go back to the office. In the office, I say, hey, here's the Massachusetts Mandatory Real Estate Licensee Consumer Relationship Disclosure Form, which I must present to you. Disclosure form, which means I'm a passing of information from one party to the other. It's not a contract. The information I'm passing is about the types of relationship that we can have. By the way, Madison, we met at the open house, so I already represent the seller, so I cannot represent you, okay? But I can work with you, and I have to be fair and honest with you. But please remember, I'm not negotiating for you. Can I be dual agent? Based on that description.
based on that description, I would say no, but I would also say, I guess I don't know when you could then.
When you don't meet them under circumstances where you're liable to someone else, right? Because you're in the open house when you meet them, so that's a no-no to swoop someone up then.
So if you run a
because you're-
coffee shop, I don't know.
Well, so let's talk about where, because the point I was getting at, it's a little bit of a roundabout way to get that, but Julie, we were trying to answer the question, I think I asked Julie was, how can these relationships change? Well, I meet Madison, and she says, now that I think about it, that I'm here in the office, I'm not so hot on the property. But Eric, you seem to be professional. I need an agent. I'm serious about buying a house. I go through my dog and pony show about being a buyer's agent. She says, great, love to hire you, sign away, and now I represent who? I represent her, okay? And so, in theory, had we written an offer on that property, I would have signed, and she would have signed that disclosure form, which was checked off as being what? Who did I represent when I first met her? The seller. And then after that, she decided either to withdraw the offer or she didn't get the offer, but she decided to engage my services as a buyer agent. That's when I need to do what? Sign a new form.
Mhm.
Okay, why? Because my relationship with her has changed. I've gone from representing the seller in that particular situation to her saying, I'm no longer interested in that situation. I'm interested in other properties and I want to engage you to be my buyer's agent. So she's got to sign a whole new form. Go ahead.
I don't know if this has to do with the form or this is just like a kind of out there question, but so now you represent Madison, right? And say
Yep.
Lillian has a listing and Madison now loves the listing for Lillian. Now you guys both work in the same agency. That should be fine, right? Because you have two totally different agents, even though you're in the same agency.
Well,
Yes and no.
yes and no.
Okay.
So from a technical perspective, no. From a pragmatic perspective, yes. And what do I mean by that? From a technical perspective, when she's hired me and signed that exclusive right to buy agreement, I've signed that exclusive right to buy agreement as an authorized agent of who? The company, right? Who operates under a single license called a broker of record, who in this case is Lillian.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so to get very specific about it, that puts us in disclosed dual agency, and there's a very specific procedure we have to follow to do that. Pragmatically, even when we're in disclosed dual agency, it is always my preference to have a separation of what I call the church and state. You can't, if it's my buyer that I'm working with and it's my seller that I'm working with, as a matter of company policy, I have, as long as I practice disclosed dual agency, I can do that lawfully with those two clients. Our company policy is going to say, that's all well and good, Eric, that you can do that, but we don't want to give any appearance of impropriety. We want to keep everything as close to an arm's length transaction as possible. So Eric, we don't want you having a conversation with your buyer, our buyer client, and with our seller client about negotiating a deal. So I'm required by company policy, which means you are all required by company policy, to take one of those clients and hand it off. It has to go over to somebody of higher experience, preferably Lillian or Eric only.
Mm-hmm.
Lillian and Eric are not going to be looking for a fee. We're not going to be collecting a commission. We're simply here to help you make sure that that disclosed dual agency gets executed in such a way that it's bulletproof from the perspective of somebody filing a suit against us. Because that's where people, not well-trained agents, get twisted up in dual agency. They have this buyer and the seller that they're working with, and they represent both parties, and now they're getting either the conversations confused, or they think they can whisper in the ear of the other and say, really take X, or they'll really do that. That's grounds. There have been plenty of agents, some of them still in the business, that have been sued for literally thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars for doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Up until 2005, undisclosed dual agency was rampant in this town. It has since been backed down. Most offices rarely practice it. we practice it all the time, but we have very specific procedures, something we'll get into a little bit more. It's a little bit of a brain twister and a tease right now, so I apologize. But any questions on that?
Yeah, that was my question, I guess, is does it happen a lot? Because I could see like you guys get a ton of listings and then, you know, say I come in off the street and I'm like, oh, they're a great real estate company. I love Eric. I'm going to hire him to be my agent. And then I end up falling in love with a house that, you know, the agency has listed. Like I could see that happening a lot. I just wasn't sure
does.
how that handled.
It happens a lot. It happens a lot for us. It does not happen a lot for other agents and other companies. And there's a reason for it that's actually related to this form that we'll get into in a couple minutes. So it's 3 o'clock. Does anybody need a 5-minute break?
Should Connor like that?
I know, that's what I'm asking.
Sure.
Okay, sorry.
No.
So 5 minutes, we'll be right back.
I think that's a question on the test. It has to be written consent from both parties too.
That could be more than that.
So I have no idea that company policy could represent.
You don't lose out at all on it though.
Yes, you still.
It's not like you have to give one of your clients, it's not like you have to give your buyer to Eric and you lose out on that money. It's literally him just, you still get the commission for it. It's literally just him talking with them. Yeah.
So,
It's
Not
not
if
like
it's
you actually lose anything out. It actually makes it way less stressful for you.
yeah,
Yeah.
Cause then you don't have to worry about messing
Just
up.
speak.
Yeah.
and in the listing packet,
Where's the oh, it's right there.
Hi.
in the
I was
listing
trying
packet,
to say hi.
the dual agency fee,
Got confused.
is it normal practice to get that signed in the beginning?
Normally they do, just in the event that they end up going in a dual agency,
Okay,
then they don't have to chase down the sellers to get it signed.
yeah. And does that should explain that it would be handled by another agent in here?
What'd you say?
Does it explain that if like?
Oh, no, it doesn't. That's
That
just,
sounds
that's
like
just like a
money.
company thing, like, to protect ourselves from
But some other
doing
people
anything
would-
wrong.
Like the personal agent would take both, right? In some other companies.
Yeah.
So in dual agency, you have to like already know the person or already have this signed that you're their buyer?
So basically, the only way that you can't go into dual agency is if they come off the street for that specific property. Say they're a Zillow lead looking at some random agent's property and you show them like 10 houses and the 11th house happens to be one that's our listing,
Yeah.
then that would be dual agency. As long as the first property, they don't come in off the street or anything for one of our properties. So,
Squeaky chairs.
I don't know.
A lot
But
of
if
times-
it's, so it is dual agency, but if it's
Yeah.
someone else's listing in this office, then you wouldn't get 2 commissions, right?
If it's someone else's listing, like say like I list a property and you represent the buyer, you wouldn't get, like,
Yeah,
It
it would
would-
have to
so-
be my listing.
so the way
to
we
get
do it
2
in-house
right?
is we split it in half. So like say, well, he's gonna get into this, but like,
We're too excited. No, I'm kidding.
so like say you're representing a buyer and your contract with that buyer is 3%. Say Lillian has a listing and the listing is the typical 5%, which means that she would get 3% and then she would offer out 2% to the buyer's agent, whoever that may be. Instead of you getting 3% and her getting the 3% from her person, it would just be split in half, so the 5% would be split in half, so you would get 2.5 and Lillian would get 2.5. Even though technically if it was someone not in this office, she would have gotten 3 and you would have gotten 3. So it's more of one of those things to just be like, to promote in-house deals.
I don't understand that though, because if it's 3% on this side, 3% on this side, 5% on this side, she gets 3,
So you're
gives
talking
away
about the missing
2, so
percent.
we both would have 3, that makes 6%, so how would we both get 2.5?
So he'll talk about that, but the way that it works with when you represent buyers, because the commission always comes out of the sell side. So it's always the commission always comes out off of the seller. So and then they offer up what they're gonna pay any buyer that comes along, any buyer's agent. So say your contract with your buyer is 3%, but the listing is only offering out 2% to the buyer's agent. That means that your buyer would have to cough up the 1%. So out of their own
What
pocket.
was Joanna talking about this morning? Was it similar to that?
So she was talking about a rental, so rentals,
Different.
the
animal?
compensation is
So you
completely
still-
different.
I'm a little confused still. So you still, there's like 0.5% missing on each side, so where does that 1% go?
So the 0.5%'s not missing on the other side. So he's gonna get into this. So I don't wanna get you too down that path. But yeah. Okay, he'll go over it.
Okay.
You
Nothing
know,
we gotta
you
worry
know what
about.
you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm not the best at explaining things, but
These are, I think,
I
hard
still don't know
concepts to
about
explain
other
though.
things.
yeah.
I don't
I
know.
mean, you'll learn as, I mean, not like, you don't wanna like learn as you go, you wanna know what you're doing, but at the same time, because I feel like there's people you can always ask for.
Oh, that's like the best thing about this office. So like we all, as you like know, we work as a team. You go to like Coldwell or somewhere, and it's like every agent for themselves because the whole designated thing. Like we're non-designated. Other offices, it's like if you're working for for an agent at another office, it's not like the whole team is just that agent. So like they like fight each other for leads and stuff. Here it's like everybody helps everybody and everybody wants everybody to succeed.
Yeah, no, I definitely have always felt that.
The best at asking questions too.
What's the difference between designated and undesignated? I've never
I
heard
think
of
he's
that.
about to go over that when he comes back, but like, it basically means that non-designated is what we are, which means that when someone hires, say you,
They hire
it's
all
the
of us.
hiring all of us.
Yeah.
Designated means there's one person designated, so it means that they're only hiring that one agent, not
You can
the.
get paid
What
separately
does
for
that,
each
what does that mean
transaction.
exactly
Yeah.
when they hire you, they hire all of us? Does that mean that someone else can talk to my client and someone
Exactly.
else can go
It
to
means
like an
that
open
you don't have to worry about saying confidential stuff like the whole MTV thing. You don't have to worry about telling Tyler stuff that's confidential about your person because technically your person hired Tyler too.
Gotcha.
Again, then having to worry about that.
What's
We help each
MTV
other out
then?
so much here.
Motivation.
It's the best.
Yeah, if you couldn't talk about that stuff.
Yeah, like imagine being in a different office and like you have a situation with your client and you
Or
like have to ask them a question, but you're not legally allowed to like
tell them.
explain the situation in full to somebody to help. It's like that's the best part about it.
Yeah.
So we just finished the rest of the lesson.
Awesome. So I hope you understand what the difference between designated and non-designated is then.
As you imagine it's talking to you.
Okay, so wait. One of them is that you hire all of us. I think that's non-designated,
We'll
right?
get there. So
You're right.
let's start on the back of the page. We turn the page over. There's a description of the different types of relationships that you as a licensee can have with a consumer. The first is buyer's agent. What does that mean? Come on. Sasha says, you work for this today. What's that? It's seller's agent, sorry. Seller's agent, doesn't matter, I skipped one. It's seller's agent, what does that mean? And what?
Represent the seller.
I represent the seller, which means what? I have a fiduciary, which means,
Seller.
okay, so I'm working for that person, so I have obligations to them, legal binding obligations. Essentially, I'm working for them on their behalf and in their best interests. Would you agree? Okay,
Yes.
and if you read that description, does it sound an awful lot like what we talked about yesterday?
Yes.
Go figure. Okay, buyer's agent, what does that mean?
Obligation to the buyer.
Okay,
Work for the buyer.
same thing but for the buyer. Okay, let's talk about facilitator. Please don't use the word non-agent because I think it's an insult myself. So you can be an agent and be a facilitator, despite the fact that it's also called non-agent.
So
Yes.
is it when you can give input but don't have any binding like responsibility to either party? Like you nothing's in it for you, so you have no gain or interest.
Okay, so you're working with somebody as a,
Like not liaison, but like a mediation between two parties.
yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. So are they a client or a customer?
Are they,
Customer.
well, they're a customer, but are they, I guess I was gonna say neither, but they must be a customer.
Must be.
Well, I was thinking there might not be, you might not owe anyone anything if you're a facilitator, you're kind of like an outside.
Do you think it's possible to have a contract with the consumer to be a facilitator?
Yeah, well,
I'm sorry, yes or no?
um,
You had the right answer.
and we'll see,
Mhm.
Yes, cause it's on the form.
So it is, so then it is a custom, I mean,
No, this form's not a contract, Madison.
Oh, you said contract.
I did.
so they know that you're not, um, like a bystander, but you're there to help, but not, no gain for you.
What's the missing element, right, versus a seller's agent versus a buyer's agent, where I
Fiduciary?
work for a fiduciary? So is it possible to have a contract, an exclusive contract with somebody that says, hey, I'm working with you, but I don't owe you a fiduciary? Is that possible? Yes. Okay, have I seen it? Nope, never, not once, but it's possible, right? So I don't want it, so a facilitator can be either a customer or a client. The missing element in facilitator is that there is no fiduciary to either party in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so let's go back to the example where I'm working with Madison, whom I met at my open house, who's interested in my in that property, my seller's property to buy. Okay, I'm working for whom? Okay, and I'm working with whom? Okay, so I'm working with Madison as a
Facility. Ooh, no.
What was my second?
You're a potential buyer.
Facilitator.
who agrees with Mariah?
Ooh, I don't know where to put that.
Luch, do you agree?
Excellent.
So
I forget the
I
question.
have a reference, so here's the question.
I forgot the question. What was the question?
Because it's all about, the question is always about, you have to set it up and understand the situation, because each situation is gonna have a different answer. The situation is, I met Madison at my open house, so I'm standing there representing the seller. Madison says, I'm unattached, I want to buy this house, Eric, can you help me buy this house? Okay, so I'm working for my seller, and I'm also working with Madison. What's the capacity that I'm working with Madison? And is she a client or a customer? Okay,
Customer.
so the question is, Mariah said, I'm working as a facilitator. So the question is, am I a facilitator in that situation?
No.
No,
Yes.
okay?
No.
I'll say no.
No.
Okay, why did you say yes?
Because these are the relationships that you can have with a consumer or, I'm sorry, customer or client, and they're not their agent. And I would imagine you're the only other one.
So I thought I said, can you see that, Julie, what I'm writing?
Yeah. Yes.
You never.
Thought I said that a facilitator is no representation of what? Either party.
Mhm.
And you're representing the seller.
If I'm already representing the seller, can I be a facilitator?
No,
Okay,
you have no.
why? Because I'm already representing somebody in that transaction. Follow me?
Mhm.
So let's go back to the definition of facilitator. Facilitator, there's no representation of either party. Somebody said it's like an order taker, right? It's exactly how I describe it. When I try to describe it to a consumer in one sentence or two, it's, have you ever been through the drive-through in McDonald's? You go up and say, here's my order, and what does the person say? Great, thank you, that'll be $3.99 or whatever it is. That's the effect of what you have to perform. That's the example of how you have to perform as a facilitator. Can you, as a facilitator, if I'm working with, so how do I work with Madison as a facilitator. Madison and I didn't meet at the open house. We met somewhere else where I was not representing a party. She said, Eric, I'd like to maybe work with you to help me buy a house, but I'm not ready to hire you yet. So I don't have what? I don't have a fiduciary. And I say, and I agree with Madison, you know what, Madison, let's go out and see a house or two. Okay? And when we do that, because you haven't hired me yet, I can't represent you. And as long as it's not one of my listings, am I representing the seller? So I'm gonna be a facilitator, right? So I check the form as facilitator. We go out to that property, she doesn't, if she likes it, I write the offer, but what can't I do?
Collect compensation.
Of course I can collect
Oh,
compensation.
you can't, give her fiduciary, or no,
I can't give her a fiduciary, why?
this is no contract.
Would she have to change this form because you're not, no longer, if she's gonna buy a home, do you become a buyer's agent or no?
No.
Okay.
No, you took.
Somebody read the,
No.
Jonathan, read me, let's hear your sultry voice. Read us the definition of facilitator.
When a real estate licensee works as a facilitator, that licensee assists the seller and or buyer in reaching an agreement, but does not represent either the seller or buyer in the transaction. The facilitator and the broker with whom the facilitator is affiliated owe the seller and buyer a duty to present all real property honestly and accurately by disclosing known material facts, and owe a duty to account for funds. Unless otherwise agreed, the facilitator has no duty to keep information received from a seller or buyer confidential. Should the seller and or buyer expressly agree, a facilitator relationship can be changed to a seller or buyer-client relationship when with the written agreement of the person so represented.
Okay, so it's not Eric making this stuff up that you need a contract and agreement to be a client, right? Do you understand what he just said? So what can I do? I can't negotiate on their behalf. I can't talk to them about strategy. Hey, you know, here's how you should approach this offer based on my experience. I'm not negotiating for you, but I'm also not negotiating against you.
So you just present.
I'm taking the order. What would you like to write? Well, Eric, I don't know what to write. What should I write? I don't know. I can't tell you that. Okay.
Are you legally allowed, you legally can't give them that advice, or you basically can't promise to give that advice?
You can't give them that advice.
But you could tell them that you can sign another one of these and represent them, and then you can give them the advice.
Well, let's say, let's do this. Let's take his question, put it into real life. So, Jonathan, you and I are sitting here. We did not meet I took you to a property in which was outside of this office, so I didn't represent the seller. You had not hired me yet, so I informed you by presenting this to you. And because we're about to go see our first, we're in our first meeting to discuss a specific property, that property we're gonna go see. You're not ready to hire me, but I've already scheduled the appointment. So I'm gonna say that I'm a facilitator. You come back and you like the property very much, and you say, Eric, what should I do? My response is, I can't. I can't tell you unless you hire me, but I can't now because what did I tell the other agent when I went in there? Because I'm gonna be asked. What's my relationship to the buyer? I'm gonna tell them it's a facilitator. So if I go in there as a facilitator and then all of a sudden I show up with an offer saying I'm the buyer's agent, the agent's gonna, what are you talking about? You told me you're a facilitator. So the point I wanna get to that most people don't understand is that agency is really tied to the property, right? Because we said that this form can change, your relationship can change, that's fine. But if I take you to a property and I'm a facilitator, anytime we ever go to that property again, that's my relationship with you, even if you hired me. I would have to go back to the listing agent if we went back to that property afterwards and you hired me. The first time we saw it as a facilitator, but then you hired me and you wanted to go revisit it. I have to pick up the phone and call that listing and say, oh, by the way, my relationship with the buyer has changed because the seller has a right to know who I'm working with as well. Having fun yet?
So if you told them after my relationship has changed, that entire transaction of that house, you're always gonna be a facilitator.
Mhm.
But but say you wanted to go and look at the house down the street, they already hired you in that situation on that property.
When I cross that threshold, I'm a buyer's agent, so I'm always gonna be a buyer's agent there.
But even if you told them that your relationship.
Who's them?
changed- So so your relationship with the client changed, they hired you, and you're going to the seller, and you're
My seller, our seller here at the office or elsewhere.
that house that you.
And I'm not trying to be a jerk. I have to know what you're asking me specifically so I can answer your question specifically.
That situation that we were just talking about, like,
Okay.
they wanted that property, they wanted to go look at that property again.
Okay, so the first time I showed them, I was a facilitator,
Yeah.
right?
You're
It's
gonna
somebody
be a
else's
facilitator.
listing.
Yeah.
So I've said to the agent, I want to show your property. They're going to say, okay, great. Are you a buyer's agent or facilitator? I'm going to say, I'm a facilitator.
Yeah.
Right? Now, this time has elapsed. You, Jonathan, whoever the buyer is, and said, Eric, you know what? I think you're fabulous. I need to hire you. So they hire me. I'm now their buyer's agent. And they comes back and says, after a period of time, after I've seen that property with them as being a facilitator,
Yeah.
they've hired me. I need to go back to the listing agent and say, hey, by the way, I'm coming in as a buyer's agent now. It's the same person, as long as your seller's with it. Now, I don't know a listing agent in the world outside of here that's going to say, sure, no, don't bring your buyer. They're trying to sell the house. But you have to tell, you have an
So
obligation.
so that was my question, so basically you just have, the only thing you have to do in that situation is disclose it to the buyer after.
Disclose it to the
The
seller,
seller.
the listing agent.
The listing agent, yes.
How often do you see facilitators? No, okay.
Very rarely now. Why? Because now we're gonna get back into, you asked an operative question yesterday without even knowing it, about what's the difference between implicit
Yeah.
and expressed.
I got that was
That's
one of my
implied.
practice.
Or implied, sorry, implicit.
Wait,
and
Okay, I was
I got it right on my test.
It's all relative, right? So,
No.
let me ask you a question. Madison, you're the agent. I'm a consumer. Or I picked on you, right? Jessica, you're the agent. I'm a
Okay.
consumer. However we met, I say, you know what? I'd really like to hire you
Okay.
to be my buyer's agent.
Mhm.
We'll shake on it. Okay, so we just shook on it. I said, I want to hire you as my buyer's agent. You say, yes, I will.
Okay.
Okay? Are you my buyer's agent? And what do you have, what
I would have
obligations do you have to me?
I want to give you this form. And
Okay.
you sign something.
Okay, what am I signing?
You're gonna click buyer's agent.
Okay, awesome.
And at that point, are you asking if it's implied or expressed?
No,
Okay.
I'll get there.
Okay. And then I can, if you agree to what you read and
Mm-hmm.
you answer all your questions, then I can be your agent.
Okay? You can always be my agent,
Am I
that's
missing
fine.
something?
So my question is,
Yeah.
you presented that,
Yes,
we've checked that,
okay.
okay? Are you my buyer's agent? And in what capacity? Do you have a fiduciary or do you not?
I would say,
And why? Because this is where it gets tricky.
you're making me think I don't, but if you're my
Or maybe you
client,
do.
if you're my client and you check this off.
Okay. So let me ask you a question.
It's not a contract, but
Well, there's my question, right?
yeah,
You said, we've checked this, you told me that was not a contract.
right.
You've learned
Yeah.
that I can't be a client because unless I have a contract.
Mhm.
So my question to you stands, are you my buyer's agent?
Not yet.
Am I your buyer client? Who wants to take a guess? Go ahead, Julie.
So you're the buyer's agent as a customer, and you won't turn into a client until I give you a separate contract that you sign.
Okay, so let me ask you a question, because you said yesterday, and again, I don't want to know who your friend is, I'm not trying to pick on your friend, okay? But when you were looking at houses, you'd implied that you'd not, maybe wrong word, you had stated that you had not signed an exclusive for sure, right?
Right.
Okay, so did that person that you were working, and I'm gonna use the term with, just so that we get a generic aspect of this, did that, is a male or female, whoever it was, did they represent you or not? Did you feel that they represented you or not?
At the time, or knowing what I knew then or knowing what I know now?
Knowing what you know then. Doesn't matter what you know now, because that's history.
Yes, I assumed that they were working for me.
You did what?
Assumed.
Okay, and what happens when you assume?
You get in trouble.
No, you make an ass out of you and me, okay?
Mhm.
I see
Now-
a lot of
You
time
could get
on that.
yourself into some trouble though.
No, you can't.
So Julie, it's not your fault, but I would tell you that actually she did represent you and there was a contract, but tell me how that was. How did I establish a contract with Jessica 5 minutes ago? I checked the disclosure, which is not a contract, but did I establish a contractual relationship with Jessica when I asked her to be my buyer's agent and she said yes, and for the heck of it, we shook on it. Let's forget that we shook on it. Did I establish a contract?
Yes.
Like a verbal contract.
I'm sorry, what?
No,
A
no.
verbal contract. So the question for you is, are verbal contracts valid in the state of Massachusetts?
No.
Unenforceable.
I don't think so.
They are valid in the state of Massachusetts. The question of enforceability, good luck. Okay? Go
That
ahead.
can also be over text too, right?
Well, that's then in writing,
Oh.
right? I mean, yes, you're right, but Julie, you were gonna say something?
So, and stop me if this is off the topic, but if someone, so like this kind of gets back to like the facilitator, I guess, question how like how the relationship changes. But say someone hired someone from Caldwell Bank or whatever, like a different agency, and there was a different agent, and then but they had this checked off the thing, but they never signed a contract, like what we're saying. Then they're like, you know what? I'm not really like jiving with this person. I want to go with Eric because he sold one of my friend's houses and we just like him. So then you present me with this. Now, would I have
Did I
to
present you with? I'm sorry.
with the disclosure, because it's the
Okay.
first time you're meeting me. So you present me with this,
Yeah.
and I say, I want you to be my buyer's agent. So you check off buyer's agent.
Yeah.
Now, and would you ask me, have you worked with anyone before? And like, would I
Yes.
like who's in fault of what? I guess my question is, does that make sense?
So, no, what you're asking with, so we're saying here that their verbal contracts are valid in the state of Massachusetts.
Right.
As I think Jessica or Madison said, is there's a question of enforceability. How do you enforce a verbal contract? It ain't easy. You gotta go to court and you try to figure that out. It's what? He said this, she said that, it's all back and forth. And whoever presents the most credible argument is probably gonna win. The reality is it comes back to the whole implied. If, Jessica, I come to you and say that, we check that box, I'm getting back to your question in a second. We check that box as buyer agent. We never sign an exclusive right to buy agreement. You start working with me, and for me, you start saying to me, hey, Eric, you know what? I think if you're gonna go after the property we just looked at, you should do this. Let's talk about strategy. Here are the comps. Here's what I'm at. She's acting as what? My buyer's agent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Without a contract,
Mm-hmm.
okay? So she is implying that there is a contract.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute that she doesn't pay attention to me or she violates what would be the norms of providing client level services, I could go sue her and I'll probably win. Why? Because
Okay.
her actions and deeds implied that I was her buyer client.
Mm-hmm.
But she did, and so I can hold her to that standard even though it was only a verbal contract, because her actions and deeds implied that that's what the relationship was. And I'd have a pretty good case in the state of Massachusetts. Forget the verbal side of it. I'd have a very good case to say she acted as my agent. So I'm now holding her accountable, and she acted as my agent how? She took me on showing. She said I was my buyer agent. We checked buyer agency right here, even though that's a disclosure. It's a poorly written form. I don't like it, but I have to live with it. And then if she's helping me to write offers and giving me strategy and negotiating on my behalf, She's providing client level services to who? A customer. And why am I a customer? Because I don't have a signed agreement with her. I do not have a written contract. So in our company, in order to be a client, we take it one step further than the state. We don't say verbal's okay. Implied is okay. I don't want you implying anything. I want it expressed and I want it written. If and when you get your New Hampshire licenses, you cannot practice buyer agency or seller agency without a written contract, because there is no verbal contract in the state of New Hampshire, and you will be absolutely in violation of the law. And I have seen lawsuits to that end. Okay, I will tell you that the vast majority, the majority now, up until the last couple of years, almost everybody outside of this office practice buyer agency without contracts. Why? Because it's hard to sit down in front of somebody and say, hey, Madison, you want to hire me? Guess what? You owe me 3% when you hire me, when we get the job done. Sign this, you're ready to pay me 3%, right? Mm-hmm. The buyer's going to go, wait a second. I was always taught the buyers never pay anything. Mm-hmm. How many real estate agents have the knowledge, the ability, and the skill to navigate that conversation? Very few. And you need to be amongst those few, because the expectation is you should have read it. You've read it and signed it. You've read it and signed it. The policy manual, I'm sure you can quote me verbatim what the policy is on commissions. Can you? No. Let me do it for you.
Guess you won't get paid.
Guess you won't get paid. You're listing the standard operating procedure for listing commissions in this office for residential is 6%. Okay, for listing. You, as agents, have the discretion, the individual discretion to discount that to 5% right off the board. So if you're in a competitive situation, or if you feel you need to discount it to 5%, go right ahead. I won't blink an eye. The minute you go under 5%, you go to 4.99%, you go to 4.5%, you go to 4%, you go to anything lower than 5% on the listing side. If it doesn't have Lillian's initials on it or my initials on it, you're in trouble because you've just violated company policy. On the buy side, the policy manual states that the buy side commission that you must charge within the contract is 3%. You, as individual agents, have the discretion to discount that to 2.5%. Anything less than that, don't write on your contracts as per MLS, because if you do as per MLS and it's a 2% cooperating fee, we'll get into all of that, and your fee is less than that, and you didn't have the advance approval of Lillian or myself, you're pulling that out of your pocket to pay the company the difference. Okay? I don't want to take your money that way. That is not how I, as on behalf of the company, want us to earn our fees. So please follow the rules. What I want you to do is to understand your worth out in the marketplace. You are going to be trained to a level that very few agents are going to be trained, both in terms of this silly stuff, facilitator and buyer agency and contracts and things like that, but also from a technical perspective, how to write the offers the right way, how to strategize the offers. You guys sit in meetings 3 days a week. No other company that I know of has salespeople sit in meetings, let me rephrase it, has independent contractors willingly sit into meetings 3 days a week. And what do we do at those meetings? Yes, we talk about the transactions, but what do we also do? We talk about, what issues did you have this week? And let's talk about this particular situation. And let's talk about that particular situation, because we can. And we believe that that's the way for you all to learn from the others that have been doing it for a while. And guess what? You're going to have some experience that some of us haven't had, that we're going to have to be there to help you, either help you figure out, or you're going to teach us about. Okay, I've been doing this a long time. I learn every day, every week, something new.
Even Lillian shares things she's learning, so it's kind of cool.
Okay, so that's the environment we want, but that will make you some of the best agents literally in the country if you can stay in a position of curiosity and soak in all the things I bark at you about, okay? So we got a little off track, but I need you to understand, this is why you're sitting here gruelingly listening to Eric talk about facilitators and buyer agencies and what's the difference between this and that, because you are going to be out in the field, I will not be there with you. Can I fix any mistake that you make? Probably, but I prefer to not have to dig out of a 6-foot hole, I'd rather dig out of a 3-foot hole. It's a lot easier. Make sense? Yes, sir.
So just backtrack a little bit, if that's all right. I have
Yep.
2 questions on the facilitator.
Go for it.
One being, you said if you go show a property as facilitator, that seller's agent knows that you're a facilitator, so therefore if you go back to that property, you're still a facilitator, even if you get hired as a buyer's agent. But if you notify them, if you call up the seller's agent and say, I just want to let you know now I am the buyer's agent, and you go see that property again, then can you act on the buyer's agent as a buyer's agent and negotiate in that transaction?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because who are you working for? The relationship is more about with you and the consumer, but you are going to, that listing agent needs to know that because you're going to be asked that. And, it's less so now, in the old days, I actually had to pick up the phone and call people and say, hey, can I show you a listing? Now I can do it either all online or do it through one of the services or whatnot. But even within those services, Showing Time in particular, which is the 800-pound gorilla of scheduling showings, there's questions in all of their forms that say, okay, who are you? You want to show this property. What's your relationship to the buyer? Is it a facilitator? Is it a buyer? What is it?
So then my second question to go off of that would be for Zillow, if I were to get a Zillow call and I go show this property, and would I check off facilitator? Because like in the meeting with Nicole, for example, she said she often tries to get the exclusive right to buy signed if possible, but that's most likely going to happen after a little bit of rapport is built up, after you go through the house towards the end of the meeting if you're lucky. So you're a facilitator as you walk through the house. So when you sign up, you're a facilitator, and then you become a buyer's agent, and then you go through the same
So that goes back to that whole point, which is what got us kicked off on this little sidebar about the form can be changed or not be changed. You're signing additional forms because your relationship has changed somehow with the consumer.
And this has to be at the first personal meeting at a specific property, but it could be at the end, right? So if you go into the property as facilitator, you
Listen, get it signed, I'm okay with it. Don't get it signed, I'm not okay with it. That's basically how I would look at it, right? What I don't want happening is I don't want you to go show somebody, pretend that you're a buyer's agent. I say pretend because you talked about it, but you didn't sign anything up. Now you're acting as if you're the buyer's agent without a contract. You've shown them 15 or 20 or 30 properties. You go negotiate an offer. It's now, you've spent 40 hours with them, 6 weeks at work with them, and that's the first time that they're seeing that? No. Not a good idea. Makes Eric very unhappy.
I'd imagine.
Okay, and it's not about whether Eric's happy. You've literally broken the law dozens upon dozens of times, and you've opened up yourself. And the reason why you make Eric unhappy is because now you've opened us as your agency, as your firm, to the liability, because they're not just going to sue you, they're going to sue us and you. Okay, I'm simply the paperwork police, which is why, as Luciano can express on more than a few occasions, things get pushed back to agents, because no offense to you all agents, and I'm one of you, you guys don't like detailers, so I'm told.
Oh, I do.
Okay, well, good.
And you are.
They
I
have a
heard I'm
policy.
the only one that likes detail. That's what I heard.
So we've talked about seller representation or seller agency. We talked about buyer agency. We've talked about facilitator. We're going to skip designated for a moment and let's jump down to dual. And I don't want to get into an in-depth conversation about dual, but I want you to think about what are the 4 different ways that you can, what are the different ways that you can work with a consumer. You can be a buyer agent. You can be a seller agent. You can be which are opposites, right? If I'm either the buyer or I'm the seller. I can be this thing called dual. What's the opposite of dual? We just talked about it. Facilitator. Why? Because not representing either party. In dual, what am I doing? I'm representing both. Okay, so they're kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum, just like the buyer and the seller. Okay, in dual agency, it can be practiced, and it must be practiced lawfully. If you do not follow the 3 elements of dual agency, which we will not review today because it's too confusing, you are practicing undisclosed dual agency, which is illegal and opens you up to massive amounts of liability, because if there we also start throwing in something called a 93A consumer protection lawsuit, which then means if you did damages, they multiply it by 3, and that's what you'd be pulling out of your pocket to get rid of the lawsuit if found guilty. Okay, well, let's flip back over to the front, because even though there's a description of designated agency on the back, so the working with the consumer, you're either working with or for the consumer is what we just talked about with buyer, seller, facilitator, dual. Okay. When it comes to designated versus non-designated, that's the type of firm that the agency you work for is. Okay. You have designated and you have non-designated. We are, you see it on the form, A, which means what? Who wants to take a stab at what that means?
When you hire me, you hire everyone,
Okay.
or all the agents.
Okay, so if I hire Jonathan, I get all 19 of us that are licensed in this company. Okay, so what does that mean?
That we don't have, we can share confidential information amongst us agents.
Why? You're right, but
Because
why? Explain why.
Because we all represent the seller or the buyer.
So we all have the same
Fiduciary.
fiduciary to the client. Now, would you agree with me that, Jonathan, your clients, that your mom, your dad, your grandparents, it's a family friend, it's somebody you grew up with, you're representing them, I'm gonna have the same relationship with them, am I not? By what you just said.
Legally, yes.
You say that with some doubt.
Well, I would say the relationship is, say legally the obligation is the same, the obligation of your relationship is the same, but you're gonna be working more directly with me.
But I thought you said if they hire you, they're hiring me. And that my relationship with them is no different than your relationship with them. Isn't that what you told me? Julie, is that what he just told me?
Yes and no. I think he mean like your legal relationship would be the same, but your personal relationship is
And
different.
that's the way I describe it. That's a great way to say it, right? I always want you to think in terms of the legal aspect of your job and the pragmatic aspect of your job. Julie just described it well. The legal aspect is, yes, you and I have the exact same legal relationship with them as it relates to their sale of their property or the purchase of their property. Pragmatically and personally, I've never met them.
It's not like we're gonna call, I'm not gonna call his, dad or something. who
Right.
sells the property.
But let's take his very accurate description is that what he knows, so let's go back, remember we talked way back at the beginning of hour 1, that we talked about this thing called vicarious liability.
Mhm.
If I have the same legal representation, the same legal responsibility to his client, because his client is my client, aren't I responsible for having the same exact knowledge as him as it relates to what's going on with them and that property and everything else?
Yeah.
You really should.
Mhm.
Right? So one of the things we'll try to drive home with you as much as possible is you really need to know our inventory for really 2 reasons. One, you have a legal obligation to do that. And 2, guess what? We sell a lot of properties in-house as a result of the fact that Madison has a listing coming on, but I'm working with a buyer that's and I'll give you the examples. Xiaoming, had a listing that he was working with a buyer. They bought a new construction property. They need to sell their house in Linfield of all places. Linfield is as white hot as you get. If there aren't 10 offers on a property, I'd be surprised whenever it goes on the market within hours. Okay. Nicole was working with a buyer. Z got up in one of the meetings in the morning and said, I just put this property under agreement. I've got a property coming on Linfield. Just want to let you know, it's a ranch, it's a 3-bedroom ranch, blah, 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 blah. Nicole went over and said, hey, I think I got a buyer for you. Guess what? The sellers saw value in not having to bring their property to market because they were worried about COVID. They felt that it could be handled better by not going to market because of the frenetic. They might be giving up some money, which is true in this market, but they were willing to do that because these folks, the closing isn't until December. So we never listed the property in MLS, but we got the deal done because we talk about these things and we can. That can't be done legally in almost every other company. Why? Because almost every other company is a designated company. Now let's talk about all of that right now. So, what's that?
I have to watch that. I was talking about a TV show about real estate, where I feel like they discuss.
Why would a company?
It's making me more aware.
I'm sorry, why would a company, you're saying most companies do designated agency, what is why? Like, why wouldn't most companies do non-designated?
Great segue. You've been practicing with Jonathan. I see it to the
We've
next
met
one.
before, yeah.
Okay, there's my umbrella. Okay, think of it this way. So each real estate company operates in a very similar fashion, and I use the metaphor of an umbrella. Okay, what is the umbrella? So the umbrella here is the broker of record. Okay, in our case, the broker of record is who? What's that?
Whole company. Lillian's the broker.
Lillian is the broker of record. Yeah. Okay, and so you all learned in licensing class that when you get your license, you can only become a what kind of license? What are the two different types of licenses in the state of Massachusetts? There is a salesperson's license. Oh, we're gonna have that fun in a second too, okay. Okay, there's a salesperson's license and a broker's license. Okay, what's the difference?
Sales people need brokers in order to conduct business, real estate business, and then brokers don't need, they're at the top of the umbrella.
Okay, so I'm a broker, does that mean that I don't need to be here?
Technically, you don't need to.
Okay.
I mean, you could operate on your own if you wanted to.
Right, so I, as a salesperson, cannot operate at all unless I work for a broker. A broker can either work for another broker or can go out on their own and be their own broker.
And hire other salespeople.
If they choose. There are plenty of people out there, there are plenty of brokers out there that are one-off offices, meaning they're one office and one broker. And that's all they are. Okay? So if you think about us, there's 19 people licensed in this company. 18 of those people fall under the umbrella of Lillian's broker license, who's the broker of record. Okay? Why do we call her the broker of record? Because it's not just because her name's on the building. It doesn't, the name of the company is irrelevant to the broker of record. In this company, it's one and the same. But Lillian takes on all of the responsibility for training you and managing you and holding escrow for you and doing all the things that you're required to by law. She has great oversight over you through my eyes and through my efforts, right? So the fact of the matter is that there are, in Massachusetts, with Massachusetts licenses, right now in this company, there are 2 outside of Lillian with broker licenses, and the rest of you have a salesperson's license. Okay? The two people that have broker licenses are Joanna. She used to own her own company. At one point, she was her own broker of record. And I'm the other broker. Okay. Technically, you could argue that Bob has a broker's license, but it's not a Massachusetts broker license. It's a Michigan broker's license, so it doesn't mean anything in the state of Massachusetts. Okay. I'm not technically referred to, I'm certainly not referred to as the broker of record. What I am referred to and what Joanna's referred to are associate brokers. The term broker, although thrown around like nothing, refers to the broker of record only in Massachusetts. I can say I'm a broker, I have a broker's license. I am not the broker. I am the associate broker. Joanna is the associate broker. You guys are the salespersons. Okay? Your salesperson's license, you need to have, I forget what the requirement is now, but I think it's a minimum of 2 years, maybe 3 years of working with under a broker. Then you've got to go through some additional schooling, which is ridiculous now. You know, I think mine was 40 hours 15 years ago. I think it's like 80 or 120 hours or something of classes to get there. So it's a process to get there, right? And the only reason why I have my broker's license is Lillian said, you're the manager, you're pretending to be me, I'm asking you to be me, so I want you to be on the level, from a licensing perspective, I want to make sure that you're a broker, even though you're not the broker of record, pretend you're the broker of record for me, okay, which is allowed, right? I'm basically the managing broker, okay? Now, let's stop there and talk about New Hampshire, okay? I could have, when I first came to this company in 2001, I had a salesperson's license, and the company was already licensed in New Hampshire. I could have, through reciprocity, gotten my New Hampshire license, but if I did that, it was going to be a New Hampshire salesperson's license. Then I'd have to come back and take the broker and do the Massachusetts broker license requirements, and then I'd have to go back and do the New Hampshire broker license process. So what Lloyd and I discussed early on was, let's get you through the first 2 years. If I still like you, I'll keep you. And at that point, we'll let you get your broker's license, then go get your New Hampshire broker's license, and then you're covered to help me manage the company going forward as a broker, as a licensed broker. So if you ever have desires of being a broker and getting New Hampshire, you may want to consider at what point do you get your New Hampshire's license. I'm going to tell you right now, unless you have a desire to be a broker, the only reason to have a broker's license is to take my position, and you're welcome to it. Or you have some intention that you're going to go out and do your own thing at some point. Either answer is okay, and then you have to decide what's the relevancy of me getting my New Hampshire. We are doing more New Hampshire business now than we've done before. I would encourage you just at first opportunity, go get your New Hampshire's license so that you can take opportunity out of there. Strategically, from when we get into the Zillow aspect of it, Zillow is ripe for the taking up in New Hampshire, and we have our eyes on it long term. So having your New Hampshire license is probably a good thing.
I wonder if the New Hampshire test is a lot different from the Massachusetts. I'm sure there's.
You're only taking the state portion, so take a state-related class that's going to talk to you about site assessments. What is site assessment? Well, we said there was no Title V in New Hampshire, but New Hampshire has site assessments. A site assessment is a state-level required inspection of a septic system that's within 200 feet of a body of water. And it depends on the kind of body of water. So I don't even get into that.
I don't want to confuse myself with it.
Okay.
I'd rather do
So-
it now.
I need to get back to, this is a long-winded answer, but I get caught on these tangents and I apologize. But so you have a broker of record and everybody operates under that, right? And so what happens is everybody else also operates under a broker of record, right? So Coldwell Banker operates under a broker of record. Century 21 operates under a broker of record. In our case, our broker is an independent broker, that's it. In the case of Coldwell Banker, it's a corporately owned company. So the broker of record is the same broker for every branch of Coldwell Banker in the state of Massachusetts. Okay, so now I'm gonna start answering your question. So back in the day, before, and one of the reasons why the agency laws that I spent time talking about earlier changed in 2005 was, let's call this Coldwell Banker Andover. And for the purposes of this description, this was Coldwell Banker North Andover, which there used to be. Coldwell Banker office now is downtown Andover. It used to be up at 305 Main Street for the last 20 years. And North Andover used to be the building at 125 Bypass, which is right across from Merrimack College. Okay, and what was happening back then, remember, this broker of record is the same for North Andover as it is for Andover. Same broker of record. And what was happening was the salesperson from Andover would take their buyer client, who they represent and have a fiduciary, and say, let's go look at this property over here that's listed by Coldwell Banker North Andover. Right? Where's the fiduciary? Here, to the seller, right? So this is a seller client or a listing client. Okay? So what was happening back in the day is these multiple branches, this person over here working with the buyer client, right? Remember, same broker of record, so in theory, this is everybody's client. They were practicing undisclosed dual agency because there was never a procedure, or the procedure that was required for dual agency was never followed. Coldwell Banker, and I'm not picking on them, got their asses sued off for the first 5 or 6 years that I was in this business. Every year there was some type of lawsuit based on undisclosed dual agency because branch over there was taking it to this branch's over here's listing, and then things were going on and the consumers weren't happy and they were figuring out that, wait a second, you've got a singular broker of record, so it's automatic, it was undisclosed dual agency. They got sued so many times, Coldwell Banker actually retained counsel at each of their branches in Andover and North Andover for the first 5 or 6 years that I was in the business. Because they had so many lawsuits related to undisclosed dual agency. So what changed in the world was this thing called designated versus non-designated. I didn't get into the answer to your question, I promise. Okay?
No,
What's that?
it's all making sense.
It's, okay, go ahead.
In this case, with the undisclosed dual agency that was happening,
Mhm.
were they designated or undesignated?
There was no such thing, right? So in 2005, when the agency laws came out, that's the form that you see now. And the brilliant operators at the state levels, although it was a decent fix, it wasn't the best fix in my humble opinion, but it's just my opinion, came back and said, and one of the people that sat on that board that did all this just happened to work for who? Okay, which is fine. I think it worked to their advantage and ours. And basically what they said was, okay, we're going to create this thing called designated and non-designated. Okay, and what does that mean? So non-designated, as Jonathan pointed out, is, hey, in layman's terms, your description to the consumer is non-designated and designated are something that happens at the agency level, and it's basically like this. In a non-designated agency, there isn't a specific person who you work with and only work with. Everybody, you technically hire one person and you get everybody in that company has the same relationship with you. Every licensee in that company has the same fiduciary responsibility to you, right? Including the broker of record, okay? In a designated agency, what that says is that the designated agent who you sign with is your one and only agent. Everybody else in the company is not working for you, except who? The broker of record, because these two have to work, this person has to work under that. Does that make sense? So in the same scenario, Coldwell Banker Andover, Coldwell Banker North Andover, which no longer exists, what happens here is this allowed them to essentially practice dual agency without calling it dual agency.
Does that create like a monopoly in the market and like for the broker of record?
I think it caused, when it first came out, it caused more confusion than people could figure out, because it was also at the same time we went from defaulting as a seller sub-agent to there is no, you have to sit with the consumer and decide what you're going to do, which I thought was the right way to go, even though real estate for the last 100 years before that was practiced with this sub-agency. So by doing this, though, what this does is it limits the liability, right, from multiple office branches to say, okay, even though we've got the same broker of record, this designated agent works here and this other designated agent works here, it's not really dual agency, and they kind of turn their cheek and hold their breath, and there they go. So why would we, when everybody, almost everybody in the world, even the one-off offices, use designated agency, you hire one and you get one, because that's the description I use, you hire one agent, you get one agent, even if there's 50 agents. There's 82, is it 82 agents when you did the last report, was it 80 some odd agents at Coldwell Banker?
Oh, yeah, they have a ton.
Yeah, they have 80 agents, and their great selling point on, or they think their great selling point on their listing presentation is, I got the biggest office in the area, I got 80 agents. So what? You're designated. You hire me, that's all you're getting. I can't turn around and talk to the other agents in that office like we do in our meetings.
Do you think it goes on there anyway?
What's that?
Do you think it goes on there anyway?
To some degree, of course, absolutely.
So how did that fix that situation if they decided to be designated?
Because technically, in a designated, it's just this one agent over here that represent them, and it's this other agent over here that represents the buyer, they represent the sellers. In the state's eyes, it's a normal transaction. We're not gonna worry about everything else. Where in our world, Lillian Montalto Signature Properties International, because we're non-designated, when we're in dual agency, you're all in dual agency. When I'm in dual agency, you're all in dual agency with me, for both clients. So again, because we've done this for a long time, from a procedural perspective, if it's your buyer and your seller that you're working with, you're gonna say, okay, Lillian or Eric, I'm about to get into dual agency. I'm gonna have you be the point person for the seller or the point person for the buyer while I hold on to the other. You will have to explain that to your clients, but it's a benefit to them because now they get to have a real conversation with somebody and not know that there's no risk of them talking to you in one ear and then it going out your mouth to the other client, even by accident. I don't even want to come close to that kind of appearance of impropriety, because then we'll get sued. And I can tell you how many times we've got sued for dual agency is that, and I want to keep it that way. Okay? But it's because we teach you, because everybody here practices right. It's not to say that we don't make mistakes, we all make mistakes. Any lawsuits that we've had filed against us, we've never had one come to fruition. In other words, we've always either got it knocked down or we've got it out, okay? But that's the difference between designated and non-designated. And when you're out there, use it to your strategic advantage. Why? Because you're in a listing appointment and you ask, are you talking to other agents? And they say, yep. Who'd you talk to? I talked to Gretchen Papino over at Coldwell Banker. How'd that go? Oh, it was great. She told me they've got 80 agents in their office and I'm really kind of leaning towards them because they've got such a big office. Great. Did she also describe for you that their office is designated? Or what are you talking about? Well, that means, what it means is they're designated, so when you hire Gretchen, that's all you get. The rest of those people are not working for you. In fact, what can happen is they're probably working with a buyer that's going to work against you. Okay, in my office, all 20 of us are going to be working for you. And if we have a buyer that's here, we're going to be in disclosed dual agency and we're going to tell you that. And that can work to your advantage as well, but that's a different discussion. But as a general whole, I've got 20 other agents that I can share everything about your property with, and I can share everything about your situation so that we can kind of mind meld and mastermind the best way to approach this for you. Would you rather have 20 minds working for you or one? Yes, sir.
I think this is a complicated question,
Excellent, I can't wait.
but so if I'm a selling agent and a buyer comes to me,
Yeah.
and it would be dual agency, I'll tell you, and then
Okay, so I'm going to stop you there. So you said you were a selling agent, which means you're working for who?
the seller.
Wrong.
Oh,
Okay, now
Listen,
that is
right.
just an industry quirk, because when you're on the selling side, you're actually working with the buyer.
so I'm the listing agent, I'm just saying.
Thank you, right? And there are a lot of very confusing scenarios and a lot of ill-conceived concepts and language in our business, and that's one of them. Is I'm the selling agent. It's used a lot less now than it used to be. But if you're the selling agent, you're technically working with the buyer. I didn't make it up. I just have to look at it.
Yeah, that
Go ahead, I'm
comes-
sorry, so you're the listing agent.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, so I'm the listing agent, and someone unattached comes to us, so it would be dual agency if they want to move forward, so I would tell you, and you would start working with.
Well, it depends. Is it Luciano who's working with the other consumer on the other side? So you're the list agent, is he the buyer agent? Then I probably don't need to be involved. When I'm saying I need to be involved or Lily needs to be involved, where it's your buyer, your seller, and your buyer's interested in your seller's listing, what I'm trying to avoid is for you to be the person to try and coach and counsel both parties as to how to best make their offer or respond to an offer that's been made. Hard to do. It's just like, and the reason, if you think about it, it's almost, it puts you into a situation where it's like a conflict of interest, right? No attorney can actually practice and be on both sides. They can't be the attorney for the plaintiff and the attorney for the defendant. Why? Because it's a conflict of interest. They have that undivided loyalty, right? But the difference between us and attorneys, besides we're smarter than them anyway, is because the law recognizes that our job description is different. Our job, a lawyer's job description, think of it in this way, is you win or you lose, right? They're always out to win, but you either win or you lose. Our job description is what? Bringing two parties together to the benefit of both parties. So the law and the state in its infinite wisdom in creating law said, okay, we recognize that your fiduciary responsibility to the other parties is there, but because you're bringing both parties together and you have this opportunity where you might be representing both, we're going to allow you to do that, but only under these certain circumstances, following this specific procedure. If you don't have those circumstances and you don't follow that procedure, you're breaking the law. And those procedures have everything to do with explaining what dual agency is, getting people's consent to dual agency, and giving them notice in writing of when it happens. Okay, we're at 4 o'clock. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but does your head hurt?
I'm confused.
Good.
The test tomorrow.
Not
So
good.
If it's a seller's agency, you're representing the buyer.
Selling, like.
Sorry.
You're
It's
a selling
selling the
agent.
house.
You're really working with the
Oh.
buyer,
Okay.
right?
Okay. But seller.
Right, so that's why I never use the term. I only use the term, you're either the listing agent working for the seller or you're the buyer agent working for the buyer.
Okay.
But there are some old school people out there that will say, oh, you're the selling agent. Sure.
Okay.
Right, but you have to understand the context, and right, and for all of this stuff, whenever we talk about relationships, we have to set up the backstory. What's the situation so that we can better understand? So when you say, well, if the seller does this and this, I'm going to stop you and say, okay, well, who do you represent or what's the relationship, so that I can answer the question for you. Okay, especially early on in your career, trying to get this straight in your head, to get it to come straight out of your mouth, and to more importantly have consumer understanding is difficult. You're capable of it, we're all capable of it, but it's difficult, which is why these forms, the Massachusetts Mandatory Real Estate Licensee Consumer Relationship Form, rarely gets presented at the first person when you discuss a specific property, because most agents don't know how to describe it, and most agents can't describe the difference between a seller's agent, a buyer's agent, a facilitator, designated, non-designated, and what a disclosed dual agency is without getting tied up in a knot. And I need you to be able to do that without getting tied up in a knot. Okay? Yes, ma'am. Awesome. Any other questions? Okay. So we're on for Friday. We'll do the Zoom again, and we'll record it, and you'll be able to see it. So what I want to do is we're going to come back and I'm going to talk to you about how to present this document. I'm actually going to give a demonstration on how you present this document in 10 minutes or less and get somebody to understand it. Okay, and it'll be videotaped so you can replay it and do all of that. So thank you, Luke, appreciate that. So what I'd like you to do is go back and reread the form again and write down lots of questions in the context of what we talked today, because I hit you with a lot of stuff today and I twisted a lot of things to try and make it difficult for you so that when you finally get it, it will be like a light bulb going off. Okay? Julie, any questions?
No, I'm good.
Jessica, any questions?
Not about this at the moment.
Okay, but others?
Yeah, I just have one question. It's nothing to do with this though.
Okay.
It's about asbestos. If it's in tile flooring,
Yep.
does it need to be removed?
It depends.
If it's,
Right,
if
so
it's coming up,
My favorite answer, or the answer in real estate, is always, it depends. What, you have to give me more information for me to be able to answer the question.
okay. So one of my friends told me they had a question like that in a real estate exam, but I don't know the context
Okay.
of what.
So asbestos
Mhm.
why is asbestos a problem?
Back to your lungs.
It's bad for your lung. It causes something called mesothelioma, right? Which is a very nasty disease. It causes cancer in the lung. It's basically a cancer in the lungs, and it's horrible. But asbestos was used for a wide variety of uses. It's a very good insulator. It was used in exterior siding. It was used in floor tiling. It's used in pipe wrapping. It's used in all kinds of stuff, and has been for since the early 20s when it was first discovered. Okay. The issue with it is that when it becomes friable, which is the operative word, which means it becomes like almost microscopic or small little filaments that fill the air. Those filaments get inhaled, and it's those filaments that attach to the alveoli, if I remember from biology
Yeah,
class, right, in your lung, and it causes a drag on it, and that's what starts causing the cancer and everything else. So it's when it becomes friable. So in a state, when it's in its whole state, it's fine.
Okay.
You can walk on it, you can dance on it, do whatever you want on it. The minute it becomes cracked, some of those spores or those filaments are going to start filling the air. So then it becomes a matter of, okay, it's cracked, what can I do with it? If it's on the floor and your only ability is to remove it, and it has to be removed under circumstances, is as you go to remove it, what's going to happen? It's going to crack and go up in the air. If it's on an exterior siding, you can side over it, is what generally happens. If it's wrapped in a pipe, you know, it's more like a fiberglass material, you're going to have that professionally removed.
They have to encapsulate it and I know.
Or encapsulate it.
Situations, yeah, I don't know, the tile floor caught me off guard because I was like rereading this, like with my notes, and I didn't see anything about flooring with it. That's
Yep.
specifically flooring, and it was, someone said it's in the test and I don't know the answer, so.
All right, but it's, you know, and again, we'll get into it on the disclosure side of it, but asbestos there isn't a requirement under law like there is like paying for anybody to disclose it.
Oh, you don't have to disclose.
Different issue.
Okay, got it, that's good to know.
Good luck on the test. Madison, questions?
Do you have my phone number to send me the recording from Friday?
Yeah, I'll email it all.
Oh, you'll email it?
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
email it.
Jonathan?
If I'm the listing agent and you are a buyer's agent, and
Do we work for the same company?
and we're working on the same deal, but I'm representing the seller and you're representing the buyer,
Are we at this firm or are we at a different firm?
this firm,
Okay, so we're non-designated.
non-designated. Do we keep the motivation, timing, and value confidential for the specific client that we're working with between each other when we're negotiating on their behalf?
So the answer to the question is that what you know I'm supposed to know and what I know you're supposed to know, because we have the exact same relationship.
Mhm.
I would say for the purposes of negotiation, yes, you should keep whatever you know in terms of the strategy for that negotiation and their motivation, timing, and value as confidential as you can. Remember, whether it's in that situation or anytime you write an offer or write an offer for a buyer, get an offer on a listing, some of that motivation, timing, and value becomes apparent, right? Just by virtue of the terms and conditions that are in an offer, right? When you write an offer, if it's for your buyer, you're telling the seller at a minimum what they're willing to pay based on what the buyer told you to do. You're telling them at a minimum when they'd like to close because they're putting a closing date in there. It may not speak directly to their motivation as to why they're buying, but you're certainly giving up some of that information just by virtue of the information contained in an offer. So you want to encapsulate it. Just so I heard that term, it sounds fun. You want to keep that information siloed, if you will, to the best degree possible, so that if you know that your client is in the middle of a divorce and has some mitigating motivation factors that would cause them to maybe take a lesser value, or I know something like my buyer won the lottery yesterday and they love the house so much they paid $50,000 over asking price. I shouldn't, even though we're both working for both clients, yes, we want to keep that separation as much as possible at arm's length.
Doesn't dual agents.
We'd be in dual agency, right, which we want to make sure I never want clients when we're doing dual agency to walk away going, I got screwed.
Yeah.
Because that's a lawsuit waiting to happen. And so we can't negotiate to the detriment of one party over the other. So that's why I would say you would keep that type of information to yourself, right? And that strategic discussion that you're having about that particular offer and the terms and conditions in that offer, that should remain with the agent that's working with them, even though you're supposed to know what I know about them and I'm supposed to know what you know about them. If we're practicing dual agency correctly, they're aware we're in dual agency. As we're writing the offer, both parties are going to sign a document called a notice of dual agency and be made aware of the fact that we're in that. And in dual agency, there are certain restrictions on old car, where there's some restrictions on the different elements of the old car to a degree. We'll get into that when we do it. Did that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thoughtful question, all right. Luch?
Moment.
Good.
All right, so we're on for Friday. You have your homework?
1 to 3, right?
1 to 3. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye, Julie.
Bye, guys.
Bye.